Hey everybody, this is Brian, and this is episode 8 of the Divorce Survival Guide. This is how to find the right lawyer. And I have notes because this is a complex topic, so from time to time you'll see me refer to them. The first thing you need to understand is that not all lawyers are created the same. They're just people. They're like you and me. So think of what a screw-up you are. Yeah, your lawyer is going to be a screw-up too. Sorry, it's just a hard fact. They're just human beings. Now, that being said, in my humble opinion, the single biggest mistake people make is they'll just go out and hire the first lawyer they talk to. Literally, they'll just walk in for a consultation and the lawyer will say, well, here, sign here. And they'll sign it and ta-da, they just hired that lawyer. Yeah, that's a big mistake. Don't do that. You want to shop around. So that's the first tip, is shop around. Look for a lawyer that you can work with. Now, that's what we're going to cover in this video, is how do you find that right lawyer? But the key here is you want to schedule appointments with multiple lawyers, and all of them are going to do one of two things. Either A, try to charge you a consultation fee. They'll say like, oh, it's $500 just to talk for an hour. Yeah, you want to avoid that at all costs. You're going to spend a few grand just looking at lawyers. They do that because they want to force you into what's called a retainer, where you pay them for their services. And whenever the lawyer says, well, just sign here, what you're doing is you're signing a contract with that lawyer where you're going to agree to pay them a retainer. So typically a consultation fee rolls into the retainer. You want to avoid that at all costs. I'll give you an example. I think it was actually the second lawyer that I talked to. He's like, oh yeah, I charge $500 for a consult. And I went, $500 for a consultation. He said, yeah, but it's well worth it. I said, okay, well, how about I get there and we'll talk about the consultation? He said, okay. Notice what I did. I didn't agree to anything. I just said, we'll go and talk about the consult. So I got there and I asked him the questions that I'm going to give you in this video, and he couldn't answer any of them. And I said, thank you for your time, got up and walked out. And he went, what, that'll be $500. And I went, we didn't have a consult. I was just interviewing you. I walked out the door. So you can save yourself a lot of money just by asking some very basic questions that we're going to cover in this video. So let's dive into those questions. First question, what are your fees? You want to know what their fees are and how they're going to bill you. The reason is very simple. Not all lawyers bill the same. And lawyers, whether you know this or not, are actually independent small businesses unless they work for a legal firm. Legal firms are going to cost you more money because now they have the whole firm they have to pay for. So it's going to fall into one of a few categories. Either firm fixed rate price, meaning you pay one price for your entire divorce. Yeah, you don't want those lawyers. You don't want them because they're like the bottom of the barrel lawyers. These are the people that are like, oh, I can get you a divorce for $200. Yeah, no, don't do that. That's bad. You're going to get what you pay for, trust me. The second type is where they will charge you what's called a retainer, which we just talked about. And a retainer is a fee for you to retain them as the lawyer. And they'll typically do a certain amount of work up to a certain point. And after that point, that's when it becomes billable per hour. That is the route I went with my lawyer, the lawyer I ultimately ended up hiring. It was my specific case. It was the filing fee, which we'll talk about, but the filing fee of like $200, and then I think she was $1,300. So my entire divorce, end to end, cost me $1,300. And remember, I filed for divorce twice, and it's because I used the same lawyer. She didn't recharge me. It was actually pretty awesome. But that's the benefit of shopping around, is you got to find the right person. So that's the first one, is what are your fees? And I want to throw this out as a disclaimer. This is very rare, but I've actually heard of this. There are what I call predatory lawyers, where they will prey upon people. And usually what they'll do is they'll offer you the moon, but they want a percentage of the divorce. Now, think about this. They're going to go after your ex for as much as humanly possible, but they're going to take a huge chunk of that with them. You don't actually see it. You want to avoid those people at all costs. They do not have your best interests at heart. Now, the next question is, how many divorce cases have you won? Notice the word won. Now, you're probably going to get a subjective answer from them, and this is totally fair. There's really no winning in a divorce. That's actually the answer you're looking for, is no one really wins in a divorce. So if they come back and go, oh yeah, I've won hundreds of cases, they are blowing smoke out their butt. You need to get up and walk out of that office, because in a divorce, no one actually wins. Everyone loses. The only people who win are the lawyers. I'm sorry, it's just true. You have to remember, a divorce is a division of assets. It's a legal contract that you're now entering in with the court, where the court's going to say, this is just how it's going to be. So If they come back with some sort of, sarcastic or flippant answer, they're not a really good lawyer. They're just telling you a sales pitch. The next question is, what suggestions would you have for my case? This is typically after you've talked to them for a period of time, usually 15, 20 minutes, and they get to know some of the details. Usually at that point in time, they won't have anything, they won't have any recommendations because you're already at divorce. They're just going to say, well, bring me all this documentation. You'll have to bring like your bank statements and things like that. There's a reason for that. You're going to go through what's called a discovery process, and they'll walk you through that. And we'll talk about it here in a second, but they're going to start wanting information from you. Now, if you have not already agreed to hire them, you haven't, signed the document and paid the retainer, I would be very hesitant to give them any of that information because that is your personal information. They really don't need to see it. The type of advice they really should be giving you is like whether or not you're staying in the home, whether or not you are taking a vehicle with you, those kind of decisions. You have to remember the moment you sign that retainer for the lawyer, that clock starts on your divorce. The moment you file, boom, that divorce is started. And if you go home and say, hey, look, I hate to say this, but I filed for divorce, your life's going to start sucking really fast because you're going to probably get into an argument and one of you is going to probably leave, or you're both going to try to live in the same home, and that is awkward. Let me tell you, that's really awkward. So they're going to give you that kind of advice, whether you should stay in the home, whether you should leave. If you do leave, what to take with you, what to say and not to say. Spoiler alert, do not say anything to your spouse you would not say to a judge. Don't do it. All right, the next question I would ask a lawyer is, what complications do you see? That's a really good question, and it's a tough one for them to answer until they've gotten to know the intricacies of your life and your situation. I'll give you an example. There's one lawyer I did not hire because I asked him that question, and he said, well, because you're a man, you're going to lose your house, your car, half your retirement, and you're probably going to have to pay your alimony for about 5 years. Now, this was after I had explained my situation, and my specific situation was I had a postnuptial agreement. I had owned 100% of all of the assets. Like, she had paid none of them and I owned them before the marriage. They were all pre-existing assets. And we were only married for 3.5 years, so paying alimony really wasn't even a thing. I think in the state of Michigan where I live, you've got to be, I think it's 5 years before you actually pay alimony. So this lawyer just didn't know what he was talking about. But in his mind, I was going to lose everything, which is why I didn't hire the guy, because he would have made me lose everything. Next question I always asked was, what can I do to improve my odds? Now, that is a solid question, and if they don't give you a solid answer, you need to be very careful with them. They should, through their experience as a lawyer, know what it's going to take to get through a court case. They should be able to say, well, okay, don't say anything to them that you wouldn't say to the judge. Pack up all your personal belongings and label them, put them in a safe place. Don't try to hide money. Don't make any big purchases. They should be telling you these kind of things. I'm telling you not as legal advice in any way, shape, or form, but I'm telling you because that's what my lawyer told me. The actual lady that I hired, Shelly, she was an awesome lawyer. She just said very bluntly, don't buy anything big. Don't make any, last minute purchases. Don't rack up your credit card. Avoid, social media, Facebook, dating. Don't do any of that stuff. Very bluntly just walked me through it and said, you want to act in accordance with complete and utmost respect, regardless of what your soon-to-be ex says. And there were some conversations that got downright nasty, and I was just like, you know what, I respect your opinion, but thank you. And if it was not for my lawyer kind of guiding me on that, I probably would have lost my cool and lost a lot of money. The final question I always ask them is, how do you see this ending for me? You got to remember, if they're actually good at their job, they're probably done dozens, if not hundreds of divorces. They have a pretty good idea how this is going to end. The lawyer that I hired, she said, look, there are no guarantees in life. We're going to do the best we can to get you through this as unscathed as humanly possible, but you may lose some things. And every divorce is unique. And I actually respected the fact that she said that every divorce is unique, because it truly is. My situation was probably best case scenario. I had 100% pre-existing assets. She had no equity in any of the assets that I owned, and I had a postnuptial agreement. So I had like 3 layers of legal armor just for her to try to start getting any of my assets. And if she were to try to get, anything out of me, she'd have to prove any sort of equity or ownership, which she just simply didn't have. And it's not to ding her. I had, until it ended, I had a marriage that I actually enjoyed, but let's just face it, divorce is division of assets. And when you work your butt off and buy like a house or a car or something, you don't want to give that to someone else. It just sucks that that's how the legal system is. So find a lawyer who's going to walk you through on how to protect your assets and everything that you have worked your butt for. One quick tip that I really think needs to be stated is do not lie. Under no circumstances should you lie to your lawyer. Be brutally honest. If you've got a drinking problem, tell them. If you've got a gambling problem, tell them. If you cheated, tell them. If you're hiding $2 million in a Swiss bank account, tell them. Because what's going to happen is all of these things that you're trying to hide are going to come out in court anyways. And if you're not just honest and upfront, your lawyer's going to be caught off guard and will have no way of protecting you from those. One thing that I see people do consistently, and ladies, bring it in, ladies, you do this a lot. You'll try to hide money in like a secret bank account they don't know about. Yeah, don't do that, because what happens the moment you sign that retainer, they're going to draft up paperwork. Your lawyer's going to draft this paperwork, and this paperwork's going to be called a complaint. You are now filing a complaint with the court system saying, I want to get a divorce. These are my terms. Now, the person who files first usually has the advantage because you're setting the terms of the marriage. You're saying, these are the things that I want. Now, here comes the sticking part, and we're going to talk about the different phases. So the first phase is the complaint. The second phase is discovery. So what happens is you'll sign this complaint, give it to your lawyer gives it to a process server who goes, knock, 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 knocks on your ex's door and says, you've been served, you're getting sued. And they now have to answer that complaint. And this is typically when they go get a lawyer. And if you're going through a divorce and they filed for divorce, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because somebody knocked on your door and said, this is for you. You're getting sued, and you now have to go get a lawyer. Regardless of how you got here, this is step 2, the discovery phase. What happens during the discovery phase is both parties have a lawyer, and both lawyers want to determine what's out there. What do you two actually own? Notice I said you two, not just you, both of you. They want to determine what both of you own, because that's how they start figuring out how to divide the assets up. Now, when I say they do it, they really don't. They look for you and your, soon-to-be ex to really divide these up. However, you can't divide things up if you don't know they exist. That's why the discovery process is there. What's going to happen is they're going to go out to different sources. They may do a background investigation. They may canvass every bank in the region. They may even call different things. Like if your spouse saw a receipt for a Swiss bank account somewhere, they may call that bank. And they're going to start sending court orders out everywhere saying you are now court ordered to release any information on those assets. And if you're hiding something, you're probably going to lose that something. Now, this is the scary part. This is terrifying, because what happens is they spread everything you own out on the table and say, oh, you know what? Yeah, I want this, and oh, I want that, and just because I dealt with your ass for 5 years, I feel like I'm entitled to the house and the car and this and that. It's scary, but you got to understand, just because they want something doesn't mean they get it. Really, it boils down to ownership, especially where I live in the state of Michigan. Now, I have to just kind of throw a flag of caution out on the field here and say it really depends on where you live, and this is why you need a lawyer. The lawyer is going to be very familiar with those laws. In the state of Michigan where I reside, you have ownership and pre-existing assets. So I own this house. I bought the house before the marriage. She put no money into the house. Therefore, she has no equity in the house. Therefore, if it went to court and she wanted the house, she would have to prove ownership, and I would have to pay her out a portion of the divorce. This is where people get in trouble. You own a house, they put a new furnace or a new roof in, 5-10 years goes by, you get a divorce, now suddenly you owe them $200,000. Yeah, no, you can't afford that, so you end up selling the house. Division of assets is key, and you have to clearly define what you have and how you own them. That's key to the discovery process. I own this house. It's a pre-existing asset. I have 100% equity. I own this vehicle. It's a pre-existing asset. I have 100% equity. So on and so on. Now, where people get in trouble is if you have something like an inheritance. Let's say, dear old Uncle Fred died and left you $1 million, and you have that million sitting in a bank account somewhere. God, I could be so lucky. Anyways, you have $1 million sitting there somewhere, and you, during the marriage, start putting money into it. Well, that pot of money is now up for grabs because it's now a marital asset. Anything you make during the marriage is considered a marital asset. Now, the reverse of that is true. Let's take the pot of money theory here. Wish I had $1 million. And you pull money out and you go buy a brand new car. Well, that car was purchased during the marriage, so it is now a marital asset. You have to be very careful when it comes to this. But that's step 2, the discovery process, and it is utterly terrifying. Now, step 3 is the answer phase, and this is usually when people's true colors come out. The answer phase is whoever did not file for divorce, they get to answer that complaint and say, I want all of these things. And usually they go, here you go, these are the things I want. This is where you're going to see people get angry. This is where your lawyer really needs to step up and help you. And unfortunately, in most states, your lawyer is utterly powerless. What's going to happen is you're going to go through the next step, which is called mediation. This is super fun. Mediation is when you pay a third-party stranger to sit in a room with you and your spouse and watch you argue over who owns what. And it sucks. You don't want to go to mediation. This is why you want a prenuptial agreement or even a postnuptial agreement. Because if you file for divorce, you typically pay the mediator. So you're paying a stranger to sit there and watch you argue with your spouse over what you actually own. And in a lot of states, if you cannot agree during mediation, the mediator actually decides ownership and how it's divided. That's right, you have a complete stranger that you're paying to sit there and tell you what you do and do not own. Avoid mediation at all costs. Trust me. Get a prenuptial, get a postnuptial, whatever you need, protect yourself legally. The next step is the submission of the answer. This is where the complaint's been filed, the mediation's been done after the discovery process, and now an answer's been filed. This is where it goes to court. Once it gets to the court, well, it's anybody's guess what actually happens. I hate to say it that way, but it's true. Every state is slightly different. And whatever you could not resolve in the whole process, especially mediation, the court may actually get involved. And if the court gets involved, this now becomes an actual court case, and the judge is going to make a ruling on who owns what. And the judge's ruling is typically final. This is why you need a lawyer. Spoiler alert, this is an absolute must in your divorce. You have to have verbiage in your divorce paperwork that says this is final, this is uncontestable, there will never be any alimony, there will never be any future payments or disbursements. It's critical you have that in there, because what I've seen happen is you'll go through a full divorce and then a year goes by and you get a raise, you're doing good in life, and then suddenly they come back and go, no, wait a minute. We were married for 10 years and you're doing better than I am. I want my alimony increased, or I need, more money, or I see you bought a Lamborghini. I should get a Lamborghini too because I was married to you for 6 years. So you have to make sure the verbiage in your divorce says final. You want to make sure this is the last time you go to court with this person, because if you fail to have that verbiage in there that says this is final, you're going to find that year after year, consistently, every time you achieve something new, they're going to be right there going, gimme, 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 and they're going to want part of your success. That's one thing I learned with my lawyer. I noticed in my actual divorce document, it was like every other line said, this is final, there will never be any alimony, there will never be any this is uncontestable. It was just, once the judge signed to that, done. She can never come back on me legally, and if she does, I have grounds to sue her. Now, you don't want to go down that kind of legal road, but what I'm telling you here is, look, get a good lawyer. Make sure the lawyer does their job. They're just humans like you and me, and they do screw up, so it's your job to make sure the lawyer is doing their job. Some final statements I want to make on this is, this is the scary part. This really is, especially, ladies, I hate to say this, for you, it's probably terrifying because you're living with a guy and now you're going to file for divorce and you're living under the same roof. Yeah, you don't know what's going to happen. Make sure you have a safe place to go. And this is just me talking as a human being. Make sure you have somewhere safe, men and women, because you don't know what's going to happen. Your wife may come at you with a kitchen knife. Your husband may throw a chair at you. I mean, anything could happen. Let friends and family know what's going on and sit them down as a human being and say, look, We've tried everything, and unfortunately it's just not working. I've filed for divorce. Ideally, you would have had that conversation well in advance, and it was not a surprise. That way they're not all angry and flipping out. But make sure you have somewhere that you can go if things go bad, and get any personal belongings you want to keep out of there. Because if they just say, you know what, screw it, I'm moving out, and they start moving things around, they may just pick up your brand new computer or your iPod or, you know, a cell phone or some antique. You know, you don't want to lose things. So simple rule of thumb is if you want to keep it, put it somewhere safe. And unfortunately, if you are in a very bad situation and you don't have anywhere to go, you may have to call a shelter. I have a friend who's going through that right now. She's going through a divorce. She has no money. She has no job. She has no car, and she has 2 kids. It was not a good situation for her, and she got nowhere to go. But guess what? She called a shelter, and instead of living in a shelter, the shelter is actually paying for her apartment and providing her with transportation. So there are things out there that can help you. You just got to check with your local community. Facebook, as much as I dislike Facebook, is an amazing resource for those kind of things. Now, you got to understand one thing. You're going to go through an emotional roller coaster, but I promise you, things do get better. Just take a deep breath and stay safe out there.